everyone. I'm Erin G, and this is Alt Text. This week, I'm joined by Florent Thevenin, the founder and CEO of Blockchain North, a Canadian news site that focuses on giving Canada its own voice in the world of Web3. I spoke to Flo a week before the Collision Conference about Canada's Web3 ecosystem and how it's weird that crypto maximalists praise autocratic governments for being pro-crypto, and of course, where we'd like to see Web3 in Canada go. So please enjoy my conversation with Florent Thevenin. So Flo, you run Blockchain North. What is this and why did you start it?
I love the question. What is this? Yeah, well, I guess maybe we have to do a little bit of a better word at telling our own story. But, this is a project really that started just a year ago, just over a year ago. So it's very, very recent. And, it comes out of a combination of my background in new media. I was a co-creator of a Canadian website called thefutureeconomy.ca. And all we did was interview Canadian leaders from industry, from academia, from government, etc., to talk about the future economy. So I have that background, and I've done a bit of that internationally before. And so combining that with the fact that it dawned on me as I started my own crypto journey just a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, that even though Canada is one of the pioneers of this industry, if not the pioneer, we don't actually have an independent media to inform, to educate, to, showcase our projects, our innovations. So I thought, well, there's my opportunity, and I'll add that in the past, I've often joined industries a little bit later and been told like, oh, you should have been there 5 years ago, which obviously is a bit frustrating. And so this time I was like, let me not miss this opportunity and let me give it a shot, So, and today, I would say, we're a new media, we're Canadian. We focus on blockchain, of course. We recently rebranded from Crypto News Canada to Blockchain North, because we wanted to focus on the entire industry, not just cryptocurrencies, which you obviously know, don't have a great reputation, let's say, since last year. But also we thought that, part of our mission is to give Canada a voice in the global blockchain space. So we thought that dropping the name Canada and calling it Blockchain North with the maple leaf in our logo, would find, a good, sort of middle point between representing Canada, and also speaking to a global audience. So we're a new media. We focus on blockchain. We're Canada first, but of course, completely open to the world as this industry is.
And I really like your Twitter presence and the LinkedIn presence, but you also have a podcast. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, we're definitely digitally native, goes without saying. I'm a big social media guy. In fact, I should have maybe mentioned that, I mentioned Blockchain North as a project. My company is actually a digital marketing company called dn4tl.com, if you're looking for the website. And so, of course, that's where it all started. It started as a Twitter account on the corner of my desk, wanting to lean in to this new industry, as I was learning myself and wanted to share this with a broader audience. And so, yeah, shortly after the launch of the Twitter channel, we had an opportunity to interview Jeff Booth on YouTube. And a big shout out to him because he, gave us his time generously, at a time when we were really brand new. And so that was our first podcast. And the way we did it was quite fun. We actually did it as a live interview with 50 Canadian leaders, all of them from outside the blockchain industry, which I find very exciting. And so I interviewed him live, and then he spent 45 minutes answering questions live in a closed door format. And we published the first part, the interview.
Right.
And since then we've interviewed over 40 Canadian leaders, and really some big names. And yeah, so this is our podcast, but we'll be doing all sorts of other videos going forward. In fact, we just recorded our first Vox Pop. So we
Oh.
went on the street in Vancouver. We did it in Calgary as well. We're about to do it in Montreal and Toronto, asking people on the street what they think about crypto and blockchain. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, so I know that you've been traveling across Canada and I mean even internationally, but let's focus on Canada right now to talk to Canadians, to talk to Canadian businesses who are working in blockchain and the Web3 space. And what's the sense that you get from Canadians who aren't involved in crypto or blockchain on the industry?
Well, I mean, I can tell you very specifically because we spent several hours in Vancouver downtown and Calgary downtown. And frankly, I thought Calgary would be way more open to crypto because the blockchain consortium is there, because there's just this kind of political support that is a bit more vocal than elsewhere. But to my surprise, both Vancouver and Calgary, most people did not want to speak to us. And that was definitely a surprise. And of course, a little bit, frustrating as we were walking around with our mics trying to get people to share. But what I will say is, we have to be realistic. I think something like 5% of the world is invested in crypto right now. So 95% aren't. This is why a lot of people still say it's so early. But those who knew about crypto, about blockchain, about Web3, were very passionate about it, were generally quite educated. If you watch the Vox Pop, you'll see some of them really had a lot of knowledge. I would say some of them had more knowledge than me. And I was like, wow, I'm certainly not pretending to be an expert, but this is what I do all day. And certainly people had, some very thoughtful ideas about the fact that, what I heard a lot is this is the future of money. This isn't going away. We need regulation. We need to protect consumers and investors. But again, most people understand that once you open the Pandora's box, you cannot close it. Once people have experienced the benefits of crypto and of investing in things like Bitcoin, I mean, how are you going to put that back, in the Pandora's box? So
yeah, I think that it's unfortunate that crypto and blockchain are just kind of so tightly wound together in the general zeitgeist, because for those who aren't informed about the difference between the two, it can kind of, all of the issues in cryptocurrency can give those working in blockchain a bad reputation. And, I think the people who are building in this still bear market are more focused on the blockchain aspect. And I think that is where all of the actual change in attitudes and in the way or in the decentralization of, many things.
yeah, I was going to say everything
is going to happen. The crypto is always going to be there, like you said, because there is value for those who are unbanked or whatever, but it can easily, there's just a lot of protections that need to be put in place, like you were saying, for consumers, about financial literacy, about understanding how markets work and regulation. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree. The thought I just had, and of course I'm not the first to share it, but it's very similar to the internet in the 90s. And if you think about music download websites like Napster, if you think about many websites, I don't even need to mention the kind, but I think we can imagine it, with, let's say, not so ethical, purposes. If we only focused on that and put the internet away, we would have lost a huge amount of value. I mean, the world is more connected than it's ever been before. It's not perfect. There are definitely some issues, but, the internet today is a lot more than those websites. It's communication, it's education, it's so much really. It could even help us, reduce some of our environmental concerns. As we could see through the pandemic, as people were communicating like this. Again, I don't believe it will replace human connection completely. Hopefully it doesn't. But the value it has brought is much, much more than this sort of visible part that made the headlines initially. And I think we should consider the same about crypto. I mean, the big, dramatic, sort of implosions that happened last year with FTX, with Terra Luna, with Voyager, with others. It's inevitable in an industry that's so new, that's taking a lot of risk, to be fair. And of course, where there isn't clear regulation. And I think this conversation right now about regulation is picking up speed. And I would say most leaders that I speak to in the industry welcome that. Some regulation is better than none. And longer term, it'll probably be better. It'll promote the reputation of this industry once it is sort of legitimized. That's my view.
Yeah, and I find that the conversation around regulation is mostly taking place in the U.S. right now, with the SEC and the CFTC being kind of heavy-handed on not even the regulatory aspect, it's more the enforcement aspect of all of
regulation by enforcement is the expression they use, right?
Exactly. And I get that. I feel that, I mean, you will definitely have a better sense of this having, talked to people more recently about this, but I get the sense that the regulation conversation about crypto in Canada has kind of subsided right now and is being usurped by the conversations around artificial intelligence.
That's true. Yes, that's true. And there's some overlap too. There's some of the most popular recent crypto projects are AI related. And that's important to understand as well, is that crypto and blockchain can be used for many, many, many different applications. In fact, probably in every industry and for almost any economic, industrial, financial, communication, and other applications in the world. And frankly, the larger proponents of all these industries are already involved, invested, have patents, et cetera, et cetera. We just don't hear about it so much. But I think that's a really important thing to watch. Now, there is a big distinction between Canada and the US. I think you hinted at it. And the first thing we should remind ourselves, as I said earlier, is that Canada is the birthplace of Ethereum. And in one of our recent interviews with Alex Tapscott, the writer of Blockchain Revolution, he actually called Ethereum Canada's greatest economic, I think that's the word he used, contribution to the world. He said if you were to ask people on the street, they'd probably say RIM,
right.
BlackBerry or something like that, or maybe Shopify. But of course, Ethereum is a platform technology, so it's a lot more powerful than that. So that's one thing to remember. And then we also have had the first Bitcoin ATMs, and we've also had the first crypto ETFs. In fact, the US doesn't have a spot crypto ETF to date.
Yeah,
so
although they have the new one that I think the Winklevosses are trying to get.
Yeah, well, I mean, this week, the real story around ETFs was BlackRock announcing.
BlackRock, yes.
And also messaging very strongly to the SEC. I read something like 576 out of their 577 ETF applications were approved. I mean, this is BlackRock, right? This is the largest asset manager in the world. And Fidelity announced yesterday, I think, that they're going to follow suit. And they're already calling themselves a crypto bank. So that's huge. Those are some of the biggest money managers in the world that are, clearly signaling that crypto is here to stay. Now, in the US, we were just talking about it, regulation by enforcement. I mean, despite industry and politicians having lobbied, and in the case of industry, directly tried to connect with the SEC, the CFTC, there has been no clear legislation. And so as a result, both consumers and investors haven't been protected. And we've seen some of the things, that, it has potentially caused. Canada is very different. Like everyone I speak to in Canada, at least, and actually we speak to some foreign entities present in Canada as well, say that Canada is actually very open to talking. And this kind of contrasts with what we hear in the media. We rarely hear the Canadian government talk about blockchain. They talk about AI and clean tech, but blockchain, I don't hear it. Despite, I mean, of course, I hear Pierre Poilievre, the opposition leader, talking about Bitcoin, and he was, of course, attacked for it. But the reality from what I hear is that behind the scenes, regulators, legislators have been very open to discussion. And I remember interviewing the head of the OSC 5 years ago, Maureen Jensen was her name. And she was already talking pretty openly about crypto innovation. And that's 5 years ago. And then you have the Alberta Securities Commission and others. So that's good to hear, that there is dialogue here in Canada that you don't really have in the US. I do have to mention Binance leaving Canada because that was huge. And of course, in a bad way. That was the world's largest crypto exchange. And, CZ is a very big advocate for the industry, whether we like exactly everything they do or not. He is definitely an important ambassador, and he's from Canada. And so Binance leaving Canada only 2 years after it set up shop, that was due to a lack of clarity and maybe some somewhat heavy-handed, recent bills being passed that, of course, aim to protect investors. But I think finding the right balance is really important. And to me, it reminds me of the exodus of talent and IP we have seen in other industries like clean tech, like AI. Vitalik leaving Canada after creating Ethereum here, that's a big loss. So there are some questions to ask here, I would say.
Yeah. Did you see Vitalik's recent comments about Ethereum and how it could be improved? And one of them is reducing some of the transparency of some transactions and not making everything as open as it had originally been created.
I know, I had not.
Yeah, so he's just saying maybe we need to have a little bit more opaqueness in Ethereum just because not everyone is comfortable having every single transaction out available for the public. And I was like, but you created this.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a very fast evolving industry and there's tons of pressures from multiple directions. And so I think all of that is contributing to shaping the future of blockchain. And no one today can really say what blockchain will be, in 5 years, let alone in 10. It seems to me right now that because, if we look at what's called Bitcoin dominance, which is the dominance of, from what I understand, Bitcoin's net value, let's say, versus all other projects, it's at the highest point it's been in recent years. And that might be because there is concern about this opacity, about this lack of decentralization, rug pulls, all these things. So, I think Bitcoin is certainly still very strong and has a very bright future. And with layer twos, like the Lightning Network, who knows? If you ask a Bitcoin maxi, they will say that all other what they call shitcoins, I would call them altcoins a bit more respectfully, that they will all disappear to zero eventually because Bitcoin is the only one that's fully decentralized and so on and so forth. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, but I do believe there's room for other projects too. It'll be interesting to see. No one really knows.
Yeah, I think even to Vitalik's, proposed changes to Ethereum, I think they kind of exist on a spectrum, right? Where you've kind of got Bitcoin at one end and then you kind of have this, kind of evolving area in the middle up to fiat currency on the other end. And people have to find out what they're comfortable with and how much they're willing to put out there and how much risk, I guess, they're willing to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. I have nothing to add to that. I think absolutely. It's, No, I agree with everything you just said.
And I think that sort of perspective will help adoption because, I think there is value to having some things decentralized, but I think a lot of the issue for people who aren't interested in blockchain or crypto is they're just like, well, why would I do that? Why does it need to be decentralized? I don't see the value of that.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of crypto's greatest challenges. It's really the why. Why do I need this? I get that question often, and frankly, I struggle to explain it sometimes. The main way I explain it is, the value proposition originally of the internet was, let's connect all the computers of the world so we can exchange information. It's going to be more, inclusive, accessible, and in a sense, democratic. I don't know that we were using that word at the time, but but the reality is what has happened to date is that few people control, all of the data. And most people would include, Google and Facebook and Amazon and those kinds of organizations. And of course, they do control a ton of data, if anything, because they control servers. I mean, many people don't understand that Amazon isn't just a shopping platform.
Yep.
They sell servers. And I think that's actually a bigger proportion of their business,
And it's
AWS.
it's the biggest that funds everything else.
Yeah, because any organization that has its servers on Amazon or Google or whatever is in a sense vulnerable. And we've even seen it, I think, with Netflix and Amazon, now playing in the film industry and, but anyway, the point is that, not only these large private entities have admittedly maybe too much power, but also governments do. Governments also own a ton of information, and we know how tech savvy governments are. Not. Yeah. So that's a bit of a concern as well. I still find it mind boggling that we're in 2023 and, if you move from one province to the other in Canada, you have to reissue your driver's license and send paper letters and go into an office and, all of that when we have biometric and GPS and AI and all these technologies. So I think for me, that's the greatest value proposition is truly, realizing the value proposition of the internet by disintermediating a lot of key resources, notably personal data, finance, etc. Does that mean that we won't have any centralization of any entities? No, I don't think that's realistic. I'm not saying we shouldn't have governments. Of course, we should have governments. But, maybe there is just a more intelligent and more efficient way and more democratic way to organize ourselves, and blockchain, I think, offers that promise.
I think most people just generally don't understand how valuable of an asset their personal data is.
Yeah, well, because we've just accepted. I mean, the thing is, the terms and conditions of any of the platforms we use, like Facebook, to name only one, are not read. I haven't read them. I mean, I've read parts of some of it, but it's amazing how much we've onboarded in the last years. Like, how many passwords do you have? How many online passwords do you have? Ballpark.
I try to use the same 6 or 7, but once you get into the recommended complex password thing, then it goes up exponentially.
Right, but I don't mean the actual password. I mean, how many subscriptions do you have? Sorry.
Oh yeah.
For which you need a password.
Infinite numbers.
Infinite. Wow. Well, I would say I probably have about 100.
Yeah.
And that is wild. And of course, it's impossible to read the terms and conditions. I mean, I downloaded a new app yesterday.
And this is exactly how Cambridge Analytica happened, right?
Exactly.
Because everyone had accepted all of these terms and conditions to all of these apps on Facebook, not recognizing that all the information was going to data farms or being sold to political campaigns or what have you.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Data is everything these days, almost everything. It's not our soul. It's not our spirit, but it's everything else.
Absolutely. You posted something on LinkedIn several months ago that I've got receipts. That I found really interesting and something that I had been thinking about for a while.
Okay.
And that's the idea of so many blockchain and crypto proponents and maximalists applauding all of these more authoritarian governments for accepting Bitcoin and crypto as currencies, or allowing all of these, having very low regulatory environments for blockchain. And why do you think that people are applauding this? Is it because they're just so invested in the success and adoption of the technology, or is it because they're hoping that people will be like, well, everyone else is doing it, so we should do it too? I guess those are similar.
I think you've answered the question. I think it's both. I mean, obviously, and I'm an example of it in a very small way. I mean, having a business called Blockchain North, I have a vested interest in blockchain succeeding. So, when, El Salvador or the Central African Republic or Madeira, or others, express, favorable views to crypto, or better yet, make it legal tender, or at least tolerate it, as China seems to be doing after, not tolerating it for years. That's all positive because, yes, to your second point, the more, we can't forget that the world's population is 8 billion. And I did the math not so long ago. Only 1.5 or so billion live in the so-called Western or modern world, which to me would be Europe, US, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia. That's it. And it's a very, very, approximative and
Sure.
it's simplistic, of course. But if we measure it like that, that means 6.5 billion people, which, if my math are more or less accurate, is going to be like 4/5 of the population, live in developing countries. A lot of those developing countries, different degrees of development, live under an autocratic government. So obviously, if, more of these countries adopt crypto and their populations start using it, and we know they have every reason to use it because their currencies aren't stable. At best, in often cases, they're hugely inflationary, like Nigeria, like Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, Turkey. I mean, we could go on and on. And where they can easily be expropriated. In other words, where even if you own a home or have money in the bank or own assets, they can easily be taken away from you. Then something like Bitcoin specifically, and crypto more generally, which is decentralized in the ether, that governments can't easily seize, is very attractive. And if that's 4/5 of the population, for the exchanges, for those who invest in crypto, and for anyone that wants blockchain to succeed, that's an opportunity for great momentum. And one final point is, as I mentioned earlier, my first interview for Blockchain North, at the time called Crypto News Canada, was with Jeff Booth, and he has a great book behind me on the shelf called The Price of Tomorrow, which is all about government intervention and inflation and so on and so forth. And he talks about how innovation or disruptions often happen on the fringes. And he took the example of Amazon, where he says Amazon initially was doing way better in the country, for example, than it was in cities. Because in cities, you could walk out and go buy a book or anything else very easily. But in the country, you couldn't. So they had a different need, right? And so it's a little bit similar with the developing countries versus modern countries. I mean, money is still pretty easy to use, relatively stable in Canada compared to what it's like in Nigeria. But nevertheless, if 4/5 of the population adopt crypto, you can be pretty sure that the last fifth will adopt it as well.
Yeah. Do you find that having these autocratic governments adopt crypto kind of right now makes the argument for Western adoption more challenging?
That's interesting. Maybe. I mean, politics. I haven't heard many Western leaders say something along the lines of what Trump said when he talked about shithole countries or something like that. I'm sure some of them think it, for sure. And some of those places aren't always very savory. I mean, I've spent 2 years in Africa and a year in Southeast Asia and a year in Saudi. And, I mean, some of it is true, so I don't, but I don't hear government leaders saying, it's only going to be used in these SH countries, But I don't know. No, I don't think it really works like that. I think at the end of the day, we live in a digital era, pre-blockchain, already quite decentralized. It's just that there are some organizations that have tried to take over basically by taking over our data. No, I don't think it necessarily does a disservice, let's say, that those dictatorships do. I do think, however, that most industry leaders do realize that those countries aren't always the most savory or, aren't always doing it for the right reasons. But again, adoption is adoption. And yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the trend line, it's still growing, despite all the incredible turmoil we've seen, and with the Bitcoin halving next year, with regulations starting to come into place in Europe and soon in the US, I remain extremely bullish for blockchain. It's just a question of patience and maybe flexibility, because we don't know exactly what shape it'll take,
And that's a great transition to my last question. Crypto investment from like VCs into startups is down significantly this year. I mean, on the one hand, because AI investment is through the roof right now. But because of all of the turmoil in 2022, like you were talking about, and then I think with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank.
And Silvergate.
Exactly.
And First Republic.
And
Credit Suisse.
Yeah. What are your hopes for the Canadian blockchain industry?
I like that question. Well, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I think we lost our leadership position, at least externally. At least I don't think the world sees Canada as the blockchain leader. I also don't think there is a blockchain leader, but, I would say that Europe, through its MiCA regulation, has positioned itself as such. And then there's all these small pockets, Switzerland, the Bahamas, El Salvador, but also places like Japan that has a metaverse strategy, which is incredible. Or China that potentially could very quickly become a leader again, perhaps via Hong Kong and all that. But my hopes for Canada is that we're able to reclaim some of our leadership, that we are able to be recognized as such, because I do think recognition is important for our brand as a country. Because again, we have lost a lot of talent and a lot of IP in multiple industries before. I think Canada is very good at creating, companies. We have a very, very proactive entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that includes federally funded institutions that deserve credit. I'm not always sure that's necessarily the best way to create the strongest companies. I
have a lot of thoughts about this.
Yeah, me too. But okay, I won't go there. But in terms of blockchain, I mean, what I really like is I'd like the government and leaders, even at a provincial level, to really validate that, that they understand this is a major revolution. It's already a major contributor to many different industries. It can help solve some major problems. I'm thinking about, for example, carbon credits, where you need some kind of a ledger, and you do not want one government or one private institution or an NGO to have full control, because then we create another problem.
Yeah.
I also would like Canada to be recognized because we're a country of cities. We just passed 40 million on Friday, but 39 of the 40 million live in like 5 major cities, something like that. And so, we have a very diverse ecosystem. I would say Quebec and Ontario is more on the investment side of things, perhaps also on the AI side of things, which, as I said, is not completely unrelated. Bitcoin mining in Alberta, Alberta, I would say, is one of the top jurisdictions for Bitcoin mining in the world, right? So that's an area of leadership. I also think about Vancouver and the whole entertainment industry and metaverse and VR. So we have a lot of strengths. So I'd like that to be recognized. I'd like leaders to be more vocal and support this industry and not confuse, cryptocurrency speculation with blockchain innovation, right? Those are two different things. Other than that, look, I mean, a little bit of a self-serving publicity. I mean, I hope that we at Blockchain North are able to fulfill our mission. So inform, educate, inspire Canadians and others, but also to give Canada a voice. As I was saying, I think that that's really important and we deserve it. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of great things happening in Canada. We have the Futurist Conference coming up. Again, shameless plug. We're media partners and we love their team. It's
Hmm.
one of the largest events in North America. And I would say many countries don't have an event that size, 6,000 delegates for 2.5 days.
Hmm.
Super exciting. The Canadian Blockchain Consortium, I want to shout out as well because Kolea is a friend. I've known her from before she was involved in blockchain, which is like 12 years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And she and her team and Jade and others are doing a fantastic job and are probably one of the most active blockchain consortiums in the world, or consortia, with almost 100 members already. And doing things all across Canada and traveling to places like Texas and other parts of the world. So there's a lot going on in Canada. There really is. But I think we need to start believing it, be a bit bolder, and tell our story better.
Sometimes we're too Canadian for our own good.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good about it, but maybe we need to be proud about our humility. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like Canadians are very much of the mentality that they just kind of put their heads down and do the work in the hopes that someone's going to notice them.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you hope for Canada in the blockchain space?
I think that it's important for us to start really trying to differentiate between crypto and blockchain, since crypto does have such a negative reaction and connotation. And I would just really love some smart regulations to happen in Canada so that we don't end up like the United States, having public consultations, public conversations with founders and people who use the blockchain and government officials, and just to really kind of understand the issues, to see where there is opportunity to create safeguards for consumers while still allowing for innovation to take place. And like that latter part, making sure that there is still that innovative environment is just so important to people in the Web3 and blockchain space. So, yeah, trying to find that balance, which is always hard, will be helpful, but also a challenge for us all to overcome. And then I would love for improved financial literacy skills for, I mean, one, everyone, of course, but two, especially for people who are looking to enter into crypto trading, because I think that the actual failure of understanding how markets work and the risk involved in those markets has until now kind of led to some negative, unintended, probably consequences. So yeah, just making sure that people are safe when they are protected when they are looking to potentially invest in crypto and trade on futures.
Can I do a last shout out? It's kind of a double shout out. I mean, I want to shout out, first of all, my team, Bobby Barone and Adam Wells, who have been, exceptional in supporting me and helping me grow this company together. It really is a team effort. Adam Wells is our content manager, so anything on our Twitter, on our YouTube channel, any content we produce is pretty much him behind the camera, editing, graphic design, copywriting, all of that, and he's really awesome. So I want to give him a big shout out. And Bobby Barone just joined us April 1st, so it's going to be 3 months, and he's a 7-year crypto consultant veteran. And not only does he support us as our director and blockchain lead, involved in a lot of projects, but through him, we've actually expanded our services. And now Blockchain North offers consulting services, which means that if you're a crypto company in Canada or North America, or frankly anywhere in the world, we can write white papers for you or with you. We can help you build a community, help you, build, your presence, do content for you. And that's thanks to in large part to Bobby. So I wanted to shout my team out. And then I also want to shout out our clients. And there's only one I can really mention right now because actually I interviewed the leader yesterday and he mentioned us, but it's a company called Helios, which is a Canadian music or Web3 social music platform that is really just launching right now. And working behind the scenes with some of Canada's most ambitious and exciting innovators is really a blessing. It's really a lot of fun, and it complements the work we do at Blockchain North on the content side really well because we get behind the scene exposure. So I just wanted to do that on top of my shout outs for Futurist and CBC. So
Yeah, the CEO of Helios, Ryder, he helped provide the music for my podcast. So yeah, we're pals. I know him.
that's incredible. He's the one I interviewed yesterday. Small world. And a big shout out to you, by the way. Thanks for inviting me. Good luck with your podcast. We're going to see each other at Collision, and I really hope we have more opportunities to collaborate because I think we're on the same wavelength.
Well, Flo, this has been great. I'm so glad we were able to connect.
It's a real pleasure. You take care of yourself.
Well, that does it for this week. A big thanks to Flo for joining me. I'll be back next week, and in the meantime, you can find me on all those stupid social media platforms.